America, I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Saturday. We have two great guests this evening. We have Representative Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, and Attorney Extraordinaire John Yoo. But before we go there, Democrat Party has really revealed itself, hasn't it? It supports every inch of the bureaucracy and every penny of fraud, waste, and abuse. That's their position. They've contributed nothing to this debate. They propose nothing to be cut. They are not doing anything in a bipartisan fashion. They're singing songs, union songs from the 1930s. They're showing up at bureaucratic facilities, acting like a bunch of drug-addled homeless people. I don't know. I guess they think that works, but here's the truth. The truth is, for them, it's not waste, fraud, and abuse. I want you to listen very carefully to me. It's not the administrative state. It's not the swamp. Listen, for them, this is a government within a government. They've created this edifice, this subterranean government within a government, and they intend to defend it. This money that's being spent that we see as waste, fraud, and abuse, they see as a lifeline to their ideology, to their power. And they've spent 80 years building it, and they have no intention of giving it up easily, and neither do their media or the rest of their surrogates. It is a subterranean government within a government. It's even below the massive bureaucracy, and it works in secret, and it's immune, and they've created their own laws to protect it and to promulgate it, and they have their favorite judges who are there to protect it and defend it. There was a great French politician and philosopher. His name was Frédéric Bastiat. I want you to listen to this one sentence. Listen. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, this is the ruling class in Washington, D.C. Over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. You know, you watch liberals on the cable and elsewhere, they say, look at Donald Trump. He wants to cut this food program, that food program. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the first tier of the bureaucracy. Donald Trump's not cutting that. He's cutting that secret tier, the government within the government. They keep flashing around the other tier. No. It's the government within the government. That's what we're talking about, the subterranean government. Here we have a GAO report, the Government Accountability Office. Stay with me on this. This came out just a few months ago. And they put out this report. And Congress had it, and the president had it, and the media had it, and most of you never heard about it. Listen to this. Fraud risk management, 2018 to 2022, that period of time. The data show federal government loses an estimated $233 billion to $521 billion every single year. That's $250 billion to $500 billion every single year, they say, to fraud based on various risk environments. Listen to me. We've got to get our calculus right, our brains right on this. For the Democrats and the left, for the self-perpetuating bureaucracy, this isn't fraud. This isn't waste and it's abuse. It's routine. This is how they want to operate. This is their money. And by the way, to push their ideological agenda. That's what it's for. So for them, it's not fraud, waste, and abuse. For them, it's a lifeline. But $250 billion to $500 billion in this secret government activity. Here, the Daily Caller from this past September. If current trends persist, this is past September, the Biden-Harris administration will have made over $1 trillion in improper payments by the time Biden leaves office, according to a report released by Open the Books. An improper payment is a disbursement made by the government to the wrong person, in the wrong amount, or for the wrong reason, per federal guidelines. The Biden-Harris administration between 2021 and 2023 oversaw over $800 billion, nearly $1 trillion in such payments, after adjusting for inflation, according to the Open the Books organization. But again, they don't care. This is an immune government within a government that has hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars over time to lord over you, to control you, to push their wokeism, to push their ideology, to affect foreign policy. They're everywhere. They're ubiquitous. And now Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and his crew, they have found it. They have found it. They have uncovered it, whether it's at U.S. Aid or any of these other departments, whether it's at Treasury, whether it's at the Social Security Administration. It is massive. It's under the radar. This is why there aren't hearings. This is why GAO puts out these reports and nobody cares. This is why an organization says, wait a minute, they're wasting $1 trillion. It's not waste to them. It's necessary to them. Look at this. Elon Musk and the crew. In 2 weeks' time, $50 to $100 billion, reports Rick Manning on Town Hall, each year. That is how much has already been identified by the White House's Department of Government Efficiency through a review of Treasury payments as likely fraud. This amount is nothing more than identifying how much is paid monthly to recipients who don't have a Social Security number or other government identification attached to their files. Doge head Elon Musk has already estimated, based upon work done to date, there's approximately $1 trillion in fraud, waste, and abuse, just like that watchdog group, in the system that can be identified and prevented. It took 2 weeks of analyzing government payment systems to make this incredible announcement. All right, let's talk about the Constitution, because we're told that those who are digging into this, finding out what's taking place, banging the pots and pans, trying to address it, trying to cut the waste, fraud, and abuse, they've created a constitutional crisis, don't you know? Article 1 is Congress. Article 2 is the president and the executive. Article 3 is the judiciary, which only creates the Supreme Court. Congress creates the rest of the courts with a signature by the president. The massive bureaucracy, I dare you to find it in our Constitution. It doesn't exist. The fourth branch of government. Not a single one of these cabinet departments, not a single federal employee, none of it. It's all a creation of Congress. Judicial review. Look at these courts. They're all over the place. Where is that in the Constitution? Nowhere. There's no judicial review for federal district courts. There's no federal district courts. Well, where did we get judicial review from? It's an implied power. Somebody's got to make decisions. So it was decided by the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court will make those decisions in a case called Marbury versus Madison. So in all of this, in the Constitution, we have Congress and we have a president. The president's in charge of the executive branch. Or is he? Congress appropriates funds, but that power has limits. You wouldn't believe it if you listen to the propaganda. Yeah, there are certain limits on Congress's power to appropriate. The judiciary. Does the judiciary have the power to run the federal government, the various agencies, HR, and all the rest? No, it does not. It's called separation of powers. Congress has a lane. The judiciary has a lane. The executive has a lane. The executive branch. Who is the executive branch? What is it? It's the President of the United States. He and his vice president, they're the only people elected by the entire body politic through the Electoral College. Judges are unelected. Members of Congress from their districts or from their states. He's it. And they said, you know what? This executive branch belongs to the President of the United States. Really? Well, we're being told today that he can't act without congressional approval. He can't act without the courts giving their approval. Wait a minute. I thought we had separation of powers. Wait a minute. Where did this bureaucracy come from? Doesn't the president, as the chief executive, have some power over personnel? Doesn't he have the power to offer severance? Doesn't he have a power to look at data in a department? Doesn't he have the power to conduct audits, to conduct reviews? Doesn't he have the power to set policy with respect to the executive branch? No. According to the Democrats, according to these activist judges, these left-wing judges, no, he doesn't have any power. He just had to sit and watch. Except if he wants to expand the power of the bureaucracy, if he wants to increase spending, whether the courts say yes or no, whether Congress says yes or no, it doesn't matter. We have to continue to fund what? The subterranean government. And we have to continue to subsidize what? Democrat Party constituency groups, their ideologies, their front organizations. There, the president has no limitations. How do we know? Because Joe Biden violated at least 3 Supreme Court decisions. Even when it came to student loan forgiveness, that wasn't a constitutional crisis, now was it, ladies and gentlemen? No, no, no. When he violated immigration laws left and right to open our borders, that wasn't a constitutional crisis, was it, ladies and gentlemen? No, no, no. When he ordered big corporations to insist that their employees have vaccinations using some obscure OSHA regulation, and the Supreme Court said you couldn't do that, but he did it anyway. That wasn't a violation of the Constitution, was it, ladies and gentlemen? When the Democrats attacked the Electoral College, when they attacked the independence of the Supreme Court, when they want to expand the numbers of justices and pack it with a Politburo of self-identified ideologues, that's not a constitutional crisis, is it, America? No, it's not. When they want to count votes when elections are over, that's not a constitutional crisis, is it, America? When they want to fundamentally transform America, which the Constitution prevents, that's not a problem. When they push CRT, the 1619 Project, that have as its core the statement, the position, that the Constitution's illegitimate, it's too old, that it was written by a bunch of white slave owners, that it needs to be thrown out. Yeah, we have this. Democrats want Constitution completely rewritten. Story after story, Democrats are waging war against the Constitution. Now, they wave it around. Donald Trump's violating the Constitution. No, he's not violating a damn thing. The courts are out of control. Congress is out of control. The bureaucracy's out of control. He's trying to bring it back to center. And that's why he was elected to do it. Look at these judges. Wow. I want you to remember, the judges, we hold them on high. Like they're superhuman. Really. Some of the worst human rights violations and crises occurred in this country as a result of our courts. Perhaps you've heard of the Dred Scott decision that was issued in 1857, where black people, even if they're freed, could never be free citizens in the United States. That's what the court said. Now, you have to abide by that decision, don't you? No. We had a Civil War that said, we're not buying that decision. Abraham Lincoln said, I'm not buying that decision. Should we have adhered to that decision, ladies and gentlemen? Then we had another decision at the end of the 1800s. Here we had the Civil War. We had all these events taking place. Plessy versus Ferguson. What was that all about? Simply, separate but equal is equal, meaning blacks are not equal. Should we be abiding by that decision, ladies and gentlemen? It took more than half a century for Brown versus Board of Education to reverse that, the court to reverse itself. Was that okay? No, it wasn't okay. How about the Korematsu decision? During World War II, the big FDR court, the progressive court, when they rounded up 120,000 Japanese Americans and Americans of Japanese descent and sent them to concentration camps and stole their property. Was that a court decision? Yes. Was that a good one? I don't think so. You mean the courts can be wrong? Yes, they can be wrong. Yes, flesh and blood, these judges. And if you have radical judges appointed by Biden and Clinton and Obama, or Trump-hating judges, some of them Republicans, some of them in Seattle or Washington, D.C., they can be driven by doctrines, by ideologies, by politics that they're not supposed to be driven by. So far, they found that the CDC had to add language back to its website. Where does a judge get the power to do that? Prevented access to Treasury Department data, thwarting audits. Where does a judge get that power? That's the executive branch. I thought we had separation of powers here. Held up severance for employees, but then backed off, said, well, maybe you can do that. Well, that's nice, Judge. What else did they do? Well, 60 days. Trump wants to freeze spending that Biden was pushing out the door for radical groups and programs and so forth. Oh, he can't do that. Why can't he? Because I said so. I'm a judge. Thwarted withholding of funds for foreign subsidies. This just happened the other day. Why? Where does he get the authority to do that? He has no authority to do that. Prevented an order from the Trump administration that says biological males, transitioning or not, are going to be in prison with biological males. We have a judge in Washington, D.C., an old Reagan judge, who said, wait, that's a constitutional issue. No, it's not. Then we had another judge that said an order that said that this administration is not going to spend money to support operations, medical changes for the genitalia of children. Judge said, you can't do that. So who's running the executive branch? Congress? The courts? The president's not allowed to run the executive branch? Or he's a dictator and there's a constitutional crisis? Really? So HR, data processing, the federal prisons, and decisions about who can and cannot get funds for sex changes, that's not the president's business. And they call that a constitutional crisis. I want to tell you constitutional crisis. Sanctuary cities. What are sanctuary cities? Sanctuary cities are a throwback to the Confederacy. What do you mean, Mark? You see, the Civil War began in part through states nullifying federal law. What's a sanctuary city? It's a city and a state doing what? Nullifying federal law. That's what they're doing. So our too old, too white Constitution needs to be thrown out, except when it's used to try and thwart Trump, who's now going after this subterranean government. See, he's supposed to be the head of the ruling class. He's supposed to support the ruling class. He's supposed to allow all this waste and fraud and abuse to take place. But he says no. Finally, what's an appropriation? We keep hearing Congress appropriates. So if Congress appropriates money for fraud, waste, and abuse, is a president required to spend it? Or if Congress appropriates money in such a nebulous and ambiguous way that the unelected bureaucracy, which is now housed under the President of the United States, he's the head of the executive, these are bureaucrats and bureaucracies, where he says, no, I need to dig into this, find out how much there is, and put an end to it. He's not allowed to do that? You know, we call this in legal terms BS. That's what it is. Not all funds appropriated by Congress are constitutional. It creates this bureaucracy. How is that constitutional? The court said it's constitutional. That doesn't make it constitutional, does it? Well, judicial review. Well, where'd they get judicial review? They claimed it for itself. You see, I'm actually going back to the Constitution, not Supreme Court decisions of old or more recent vintage. No. So Congress doesn't have a free check. The courts don't have a free check. But they've created this massive bureaucracy, and they've put it in the executive branch. Our biggest legislature is in the executive branch. What happened to separation of powers? And the only one who apparently is not allowed to control it, to oversee it, is the President of the United States. The only official who's elected by all the people of the United States is the one who's not allowed to look at it, let alone control it. He's not allowed to reduce the number of employees, let alone oversee them. He's not allowed to make policy decisions about all the things that are under him. A GS-13 bureaucrat can, an inspector general can, of course. A cabinet secretary, not so much, especially if they're appointed by Trump, but everybody else has a say except him. Now that would be a real constitutional crisis, wouldn't it? Yes, it would. So this government within a government is doing everything it can to defend itself. It's spending trillions of dollars without your knowledge. And Donald Trump and Elon Musk and his crew are revealing it, and they're trying to do something about it. They deserve our 100% support because this has never been done before. Not since Woodrow Wilson and the early progressives, a.k.a. American Marxists, through Franklin Roosevelt, through Lyndon Johnson, through Obama, Clinton, Biden, and up to this day. They've gotten away with it. They've gotten away with it. But it's a new day. There's a new sheriff and a deputy sheriff. They may be public enemy number one and number two to the entrenched ruling class, but not to us. They're heroes. I'll be right back. Welcome back, America. We're here with our friend Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, just a general question to begin with. You have a vast majority of, I think, one or two. And in New York, Elise Stefanik is about to become the ambassador to the United Nations. And it's my understanding that Governor Hochul is trying to do everything she can with the supermajority Democrats in Albany to prevent you from replacing that seat until the next election. Are those rumors correct?
We'll find out soon. There are a lot of hijinks going on in Albany, and we're very concerned about it. They would be disenfranchising, 750,000 New Yorkers who live in that district if they were to keep it open until the fall. They would be doing that, obviously, to try to keep our majority as razor thin as possible, and it's unfair, and it looks like open political corruption, but they seem not to care in New York.
Wow, and I thought they were the party of democracy. I guess I've been misled for half a century. Mr. Speaker, my question to you is this. With the Republicans in the House of Representatives, surely they see the dire situation that we're facing. They see that President Trump is fighting mightily. When it comes to spending, taxing, and the debt, Is there pretty much a unification going on within the Republican Party as the various disagreements are being worked out, or is that still a process underway?
Well, it's a long process. Anytime you have, 218 people to contend with all their various ideas and interests, it's a challenge when you have a margin of 1 or 2 votes. But we'll get there because, look, I can tell you every single Republican in the House and the Senate have the same objective. We want to deliver on the America First agenda that President Trump campaigned on and that we all campaigned on, and all of its components. The way we get there is it takes a long deliberative process. Why? Because we want to, for example, extend the Trump-era tax cuts. We have to, Mark, because you and I know if we don't, we'll have the largest tax increase in U.S. history at the end of this year when all those tax cuts expire. But the challenge we have is that to do that costs about $4.5 trillion. So our deficit hawks and the people who are concerned about the nation's debt, as I am, I'm one of those, we want to make sure that we can do that responsibly and make sure that we bring about a pro-growth economy again. So the details of doing all that is we have a very ambitious legislative agenda. I believe that the one big beautiful bill that the president and I keep talking about, I believe it could be the most consequential piece of legislation in many decades for the country. So to get it right and to get all the various provisions of it correct just takes a lot of time, but we'll get there. We'll get there. And I'm excited about it and very optimistic about the outcome.
Let me ask you a question about the party opposite led by Hakeem Jeffries. It seems like they're always waiting for a platinum invitation to participate in this process. Do they ever knock on the door and say, hey, we have some ideas for cutting spending. Hey, we have some ideas for cutting hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud and waste. Hey, we have a General Accountability Office record here from a few months ago that says $500 billion a year is being wasted. You know, Mr. Speaker, we want to assist you in this effort. Do you ever get a knock on the door that says anything like that?
No, I haven't gotten that knock, Mark, and it's very disappointing. Now, look, I believe that there are some Democrats in the House and the Senate who have the same concern. They have to. Their conscience would tell them that it is wrong to engage in waste, fraud, and abuse at the federal government level. It's something that we should all be fighting against. But they have an allergic knee-jerk reaction, okay, to almost anything that President Trump and Elon Musk and the cabinet members are suggesting. And it becomes an irrational thing. They are flailing about right now. The Democratic Party has no identified leader. They have no vision. Their platform has been soundly rejected by the American people. And they seem to not know what to do. And so what it comes out as is this lashing back against the agenda and what we're doing. Think of it. I mean, Elon Musk and I talked with him Monday of this last week, met with him for an hour in his office. He's in the Secretary of War room, the old Secretary of War room in the Eisenhower building. And we laughed about how appropriate that is because he's declared war on the deep state and the bureaucracy. And you have Democrats now out having rallies to stop him. What is he doing? He's identifying and allowing us to cut out fraud, waste, and abuse. How could they be against that? It's irrational. It's going to work against them, and I think the American people are watching this very closely.
It sounds like they've taken a very firm position for fraud, waste, and abuse. They've taken a very firm position that they don't care that $50 to $100 billion is lost every year in Social Security. They've taken a very firm position. So what? $250 billion, $500 billion is lost every single year. My contention is, Mr. Speaker, because they don't care. Because this funds this government within a government that pushes their ideology, and I think that's what's going on. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. We're here with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Mr. Speaker, Democrats have shown a little ankle. They want to shut down the government. Some of them have actually gone on TV. Now they've been pulled back. So it looks like they're trying to lay a trap for you folks, you Republicans in the House and the Senate. It looks like they're trying to lay a trap for Donald Trump. But will this trap work since they're now outspoken about, if you cut waste, fraud, and abuse, we're going to shut down the government? First of all, that's not only insane, but is that politically wise, or do you think they'll get away with it?
Well, I certainly hope not. They are trying to lay a trap. I mean, some of them are, as you said, they've said it publicly, but shutting the government down would be very irresponsible. And in every other scenario, they always decry that as a terribly irresponsible step to take. But again, they're desperate. They're going to try to do anything they can to stop President Trump and all the efficiencies that we're bringing into government. We're going to continue to negotiate in good faith. We are. Our appropriators have been working around the clock to come up with a top-line number that will get the appropriations done and do it in due course. We have a deadline coming up on March 14th. We're watching it very closely, and we're very hopeful that they don't push us into a CR situation or something else. But we'll see how it develops. There's a lot of game yet to be played. I wish it wasn't a game, Mark. I wish that everybody would come to the table, our Democrat colleagues, and do the right thing. But again, they're grasping at straws right now. They're actually calling for weapons in the streets. They've declared war. They've been having at these rallies saying the most outrageous things. If they would just roll their sleeves up and come to the table and work with us, we could do this in a bipartisan fashion, but that does not seem to be what they're going to do.
And they also seem the F word is a persuasive word out there in America, because they're dropping the F-bomb left and right as they sing their 1930s Union songs in front of these decrepit old bureaucratic buildings that actually don't have too many bureaucrats in there because their supporters are working from home. Let me ask you this question, Mr. Speaker. How is it working with the Senate Republican leadership and so forth? I mean, you got to have a united front in dealing with the Democrats and getting a lot of this through.
Yeah, that's a great question. No daylight between the House and Senate Republicans. The media has been trying to divide us. They've been trying to divide Republicans against themselves in each chamber and then divide the chambers against one another. We're not having any of that. I meet regularly with Leader Thune. He's doing a great job over there with his majority. For the first time in history, Mark, the Senate Republicans have a larger majority than the House Republicans. So we have the greater challenge in our chamber, and they recognize that. You know, there's been a debate about the 1 versus 2 bill strategy and all of that. I don't take any issue with anybody about that. We all have exactly the same mission, the same objective. There are different ideas on how to get there. But I keep telling my Senate colleagues, they've got to trust me in the House. You know, we have 165 additional personalities to deal with in our side, and we have a more diverse caucus because we have people from very different parts of the country with very different interests. At the end of the day, we are going to deliver the American First agenda. We are going to deliver on the mandate that the American people gave to President Trump and all of us. And I'm excited about that. I can see it, the light at that end of that tunnel, and we're going to get there in due course.
I want to ask you another question related to Elon Musk. They turn him into this boogeyman. Why do you think they love multi-billionaire George Soros, who has used the various instrumentalities of the government to acquire radio stations, who spends tens of billions of dollars throughout the years, he and his son, to influence our government, to insinuate themselves in governmental decisions, to elect prosecutors who refuse to prosecute and so forth? That's their sugar daddy. That's their guy. But when it comes to Elon Musk, they want him criminally investigated. They believe he doesn't have any role in anything and so forth and so on. Do you see this as complete hypocrisy?
Complete hypocrisy. And what Elon is doing is heroic. He used the word in the opening monologue. Exactly right. This is an heroic effort. He is bringing common sense and transparency and sunlight to the federal government, to the bureaucracy, to what many of us refer to as the deep state. And this is what he and I were talking about just on Monday night at his office. I said, Elon, I am so excited about what you are doing, what you are uncovering. I said, you think of this as a scientist and a data analyst. I think of it as a constitutional law attorney and historian. Elon, what we are going to be able to do through this effort is restore the original intent of the framers of the Constitution. What they had in mind is a small federal government that was closely monitored and had heavy oversight by the duly elected representatives of the people. The challenge we've had here in recent decades is that members of Congress, these representatives, have not been able to do that job well. The oversight job has been hindered because the deep state and the bureaucracy has not turned over the data. They wouldn't give us the information we were seeking. We didn't know all this because it was hidden. Now Elon has cracked the code. He is on the inside of the belly of the beast, Mark, and he is unveiling and revealing all these things that we knew intuitively were happening, but we didn't have the evidence. This is a game changer. It is truly revolutionary. And we're going to restore, ultimately, through this process, the federal government to the original intent of the founders. And that's what has the big government, socialist, liberals, and Democrat Party apoplectic, because they're afraid of what the final result of this is going to be. And it's very exciting for the people.
You're so right. If you love the country, you love the Constitution, you love small R republicanism, you're cheering these guys on. Mr. Speaker, thank you for all you're doing, and God bless you, my friend.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be with you.
We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. We're here with one of America's great lawyers, and I mean it. John Hughes, a buddy of mine, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, UC Berkeley law professor, a very courageous man, considering he's at UC Berkeley and he shows up on my show. That's pretty brave. John Yoo, I want to talk quickly about nullification. This was a big effort by what would turn out to be the Confederate States later to try and undermine the federal Constitution and divide the country, nullifying federal law. Madison and others came out and denounced it. When we have governors and mayors in Democrat states saying, we're sanctuary cities and we are going to defy the position of the federal government when it comes to immigration and deportation, or we have somebody like AOC doing it and so forth, is this not nullification of the Confederacy kind?
Yes, Mark, you're exactly right. You thought this was settled by the Civil War, or at least by the Civil Rights Movement. States are not allowed to interfere, harass, impede federal law enforcement when they're carrying out legitimate federal duties. And one of the core duties of the federal government is to protect our borders and to manage immigration. The Supreme Court has repeatedly said this is not an area for the states. This is exclusive. This is one of the highest responsibilities of the federal government. So when you see state governors and state and city mayors saying, we're going to hide illegal aliens, we're going to, in fact, release convicted murderers from prison and then not tell the federal government where they are so that they can't, right, apprehend them and remove them from the country, which I think everybody should agree is the highest priority. Then you have state officers trying to prevent federal law enforcement from doing their jobs. Just like, I hate to say it, in the civil rights movement, you saw Southern segregationist governors, Southern segregationist mayors trying to prevent the federal government from ensuring the equal rights of African Americans. And just as you say, and bring it all the way back around to the founding, as you did, Mark, you saw people who wanted to defend slavery try to prevent the federal government from performing its constitutional and legal duties.
So nullification, the modern Democrat Party is using the tool of the slave South of the Confederacy. I just want Americans to understand that. Let's go on, because they keep talking about a constitutional crisis, and they would know one since they're in the middle of them all the time. The Electoral College was set up so even the states with smaller populations would have a say in the government. It was set up to bring harmony to the entire process so a relative few metropolitan areas wouldn't control the country. And now they seek to destroy the Electoral College. That would be the party that says they're defending the Constitution. They want to destroy the Electoral College. What happens if they succeed in destroying the Electoral College?
I think you're right, Mark. They're saying constitutional crisis, when all President Trump is doing with his executive orders and going to court is the regular workings of the separation of powers. Who actually wants to overturn our constitutional order? It's, I think, progressives who want to get rid of the Electoral College so that the whole presidency is just decided by 10 cities where most people might live. They want to, right, pack the Senate. They want to add new states to the Senate to unbalance it. They want to pack the Supreme Court, right? They want to add, President Biden proposed putting term limits on justices. Other progressives want to add 6 or 8 new justices because they don't like the way the Supreme Court's making its decisions. So who really poses a threat to the constitutional order? I don't think it's Donald Trump or J.D. Vance, who I think are, again, fighting about the separation of powers as the American voters wanted them to. It's people on the left who keep talking about changing the way our Constitution works because they don't like the results.
And they attack the men who wrote it. They tear down their statues. They push an ideology, whether it's the 1619 Project or CRT or all the rest of it, that attacks the very heart of our founding and so forth and so on. They're teaching this in our schools today. When we come back, John Yoo, should the federal district courts be running the federal government? And isn't that what some of them are trying to do? We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. We're here with Professor John Yoo. John Yoo, we have a number of federal district judges, by the way, who are not in the Constitution. They were created by Congress, as you know, various judiciary acts, trying to tell the man who is in the Constitution, the President of the United States, how to run the executive branch. Whatever happened to separation of powers? These are unelected judges. They don't even exist in the Constitution. Judicial review isn't even in the Constitution. It's an implied power since Marbury versus Madison. We have judges making decisions now for the president on human resources, on audits, on data collection, on spending policies within spending bills, decisions about whether or not his administration should be supporting transgender operations for children and so forth and so on, and one unelected federal judge after another, who, let's be honest, they're just lawyers in black robes, right? Saying, no, 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 my opinion is this, my opinion is this. They're not even referencing the Constitution of the United States specific provisions when they do it. What do you make of this?
These district judges are acting beyond the proper scope of their authority in numerous ways. First, we have a president who just won a resounding victory. The American people want him to take action. If anybody under the Constitution is supposed to try to limit what President Trump is doing, it's not the courts, it's Congress. Most of what President Trump is doing actually is related to, as you said, Mark, the internal management of the executive branch. He's almost like the head human resources officer, and he's saying, you don't have to watch those DEI videos, and we're going to cut down on positions that we don't need anymore, and we're going to find ways to save money. That's not the job of the courts, is to interfere in the way the president, at the head, again, winning the Electoral College, at the head of a mandate, is trying to run the executive branch. That's up to Congress. The reason why Congress isn't doing anything is because you have a party in power, Congress, that agrees with President Trump. So these individual judges in carefully chosen jurisdictions like Rhode Island or Boston, right, they are trying to stop the entire federal government, the entire nation, from pursuing those policies that the president and the Congress agree on. Now, these judges are not allowed to extend these injunctions, I think, all throughout the country. They might be able to say, okay, President Trump, I disagree that you cut off funding for some shelter in Rhode Island. But they don't have the power to say, and you have to restore all grants, all spending, and go back to business as usual. I'm going to order you to open up the Treasury and spend money that you don't want to. And this is not just my view. I don't think it's just your view, Mark. This is the view of several justices on the Supreme Court who have called for the Supreme Court to take up this issue, and I think they will in the next few months, and discipline these trial judges and say, you don't have the right to stop the entire federal government from moving forward on the agenda that the president and Congress agree on outside the confines of your little courtroom.
Just to underscore your point, there's hundreds of these federal district judges in every state when you add them all together. And what's happening is these Democrat attorneys general, these unions and others are bringing cases in these heavy Democrat districts where a lot of these judges are. You mentioned them: Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Washington State, Washington, D.C., New York. They're not bringing them in Lawrence, Kansas. They're not bringing them in Peoria, Illinois. This is where they're bringing them. They're getting the judges they want pretty much. And these judges, some of them think that they can put in even an injunction for the whole country, even though that's never been the case, and they don't have that power. And it is time that John Roberts and the Supreme Court put their foot down. You mentioned justices. Clarence Thomas has been very vocal about how these judges are operating way outside their authority. So when it comes to the Constitution and a constitutional crisis, I will say this. There is a constitutional crisis. It's due to the Democrats, it's due to the leftists, and in many cases, it's due to these activist judges. John Yoo, I want to thank you always. So sound, so sober. God bless you, my friend.
Thanks, Mark. It's really great to be with you. Thanks a lot.
We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. I think there's some confusion about how the Department of Justice operates when it comes to a U.S. Attorney's Office, even the Southern District of New York, which kind of hangs itself out there as a special division. The Attorney General of the United States is in charge of prosecutions, not any individual prosecutor, not any individual United States attorney. And if an Attorney General reads charges against a defendant and finds those charges to be lacking, he or she has every right to step in. Every right to step in. U.S. attorneys and others have been wrong many times about cases they've brought. Public Integrity Section of the Criminal Division's been wrong on numerous times. Senator Ted Stevens, the prosecutors held evidence. The late senator was railroaded. It was discovered. You look at former Governor Bob McDonnell, the special counsel in effect, the Public Integrity Section that went after him. Supreme Court ruled unanimously that that was nonsense. I remember NASA Administrator James Beggs, during the Reagan administration, prosecutors brought phony charges against him. They eventually dropped them, but they ruined his life. And my boss, Attorney General Meese, wrote him a letter of apology. I read the charges against Adams. At the time, I said, this is weak tea. Why are they doing this? And if it's the decision of the United States Department of Justice, under Pam Bondi and others that it's weak tea. They have an obligation to step in and stop it, no matter who resigns, no matter who writes letters, no matter who, knowing nothing about the facts behind the scenes, argues that this is an outraged political attack on the system. I'll see you tomorrow night on Life, Liberty, and Levin.